Hey guys, what is up? So this is my first time actually running this thing personally. Last time I did this, it was run by Lucid Layla. So hopefully we won't have any technical difficulties. We will see how this goes.
You need a website. Why not do it?
It looks like so far we've got.
You can create your own professional
I've got an ad running. Hang on, skip my ad. Technical difficulties. We will see how this goes.
You need a website. Why not do it?
It looks like so far we've got.
You can create your own professional
All right, let me see if I can turn down the volume on this. I don't need to hear my own self talking. All right, there we go. So it looks like we've got a few people online. I'm the only one currently in the live hangout. So what I'm going to do is, if you guys have any questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat. Otherwise, I've got a whole bunch of questions that people sent in, people who said that they wouldn't be able to join. So I'll go ahead and I'll get started on those. And as you guys have questions, or as you want to join, or you want to, chip into the conversation, feel free to. All right, so very first question is actually about supplements, and that's something I haven't talked much about before in my previous videos. Are there any supplements that will help when you are learning to project or lucid dream or things like that? So I've experimented with several of these. There's a whole lot that I haven't experimented with, but I've gone on lucid dream forums and OBE forums, and I've picked out a few here and there. The things primarily that I've played around with a little bit are different types of vitamins. I've had people tell me vitamin C can enhance your brain activity at night. I've experimented with vitamin D, melatonin, mugwort, and something else called 5-HTP, which is, I think it's hydroxytryptophan is the scientific name for it. And that is, what I believe that is that's actually the chemical in turkeys that will make you tired after you have a Thanksgiving dinner. So what I can tell you is that any sort of, hang on one second. It looks like we've got some other people who are saying they're in Hangouts. Let's see. It says that I'm the only one in the Hangout right now. Let me send the link one more time in the comments here. All right, so I'm going to see if I can get this Hangout working. All right, there we go. Brian just joined the Hangout.
Hello.
Cool. Looks like that link worked. So maybe the link I posted in the description was not correct. I'll double check that actually here real quick here. All right, I'm going to put the link to the Hangout is going to be in the description for the chat. I'm saving that right now. So if you've got a link to the Hangout that's not working, maybe that changed at some point. Sorry, that was unintentional. And hopefully you'll be able to view it using the link that is now in the description. All right, oh, cool. We've got a lot of people on. So I just refreshed my page here. It looks like we've got a good 7 or 8 people in the live chat. So if anybody else is interested in joining the Hangout, like I said, I just put the link to the Hangout in the description of this video. Click on that. It looks like it's working. I've got Brian and myself in there so far. And if you are interested in just sitting in the live chat, that's fine too. And I'll try to get to your questions as I see them pop up. But it's cool that you guys are willing to join. Thank you. So what I was talking about just a minute ago, my very first question is about supplements. And, out of all the different types of supplements that I've tried, really the only thing that I've noticed have any sort of difference or any sort of impact on me at all is the 5-HTP, that hydroxytryptophan. If you do some reading on that, what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to have a dream rebound type effect, being that you don't dream at all during the first half of the night. And then during the second half of the night, your dreams are just insanely vivid and intense. And so I've had this help quite a bit with lucid dreaming. Actually, I was taking it pretty regularly for about a month and a half, and I had some of the craziest lucid dreams while I was on it. Now, that being said, I've never had any sort of supplement help me in my out-of-body experience practice. So that's my own personal input on that. If anybody else who's on here has any thoughts on supplements, anything that you've tried, that that you want to share with everybody else, please feel free to chime in. If you write it in the comment thread or in the live chat, I'll read off your comment for you. All right, so that was the first question. All right, this next one, this is a very common one. And I actually got this question from several different people. It's actually sort of a combination of two questions. First question was, how does sex affect the initiating of an OBE? There's a belief out there, and I've run across this lots of times, that abstinence will make you more spiritual and improve your capabilities to do things like energy work and projection. You know, I'll tell you personally, I have not found this to be the case. I found that it doesn't seem to make any difference at all. And I think that this is one of those scenarios where belief or the placebo effect or, you know, something like that is impacting your results. And so if you truly believe that abstinence is going to help you succeed, just like if you truly believe that lying with your head facing north is going to help you succeed, then it's likely that it's going to help you because you honestly believe that that's the case. And this belief is akin to intent, and intent is incredibly important when you're learning to project. But if you don't have an opinion on it either way going into it, what I found is that it doesn't seem to make any difference at all. Oh, hang on one sec. So vitamin B6, Nero Fiora, hopefully I said that right. Vitamin B6 is one that he says will help you improve your dream recall. So if anybody is having trouble with their dream recall, maybe give that a try. Vitamin B6, in addition to writing in a dream journal regularly, I found that is the key for me to improving my own dream recall.
Mike, you hear me okay?
I've got a question from, hang on one sec. Actually, it looked like Brian was trying to talk here. Maybe I can't hear him. Were you trying to say something, Brian, in the yeah. Oh, hang on. Let me turn up my volume here. I can't hear you. Actually, it looked like Brian was trying to talk here. Maybe I can't hear him. Were you trying to say something, Brian, in the I am having technical difficulties. I apologize. This is my first attempt at doing this. One moment. All right. Brian, if you wouldn't mind, can you try just saying something and see if I can hear you?
Hello. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Huh. Well, yeah, I apologize. I don't want to spend the whole time troubleshooting this Hangout. I'm not sure why the sound isn't coming through the Hangout. It looks like it's going to YouTube okay, because if I turn up the volume there, I can hear myself. Oh, you guys can hear Brian. So then I guess the problem is that I've got my volume down intentionally because there's a delay when it goes to YouTube. There I can hear myself. Oh, you guys can hear Brian. So then I guess the problem is that I've got my volume down intentionally because there's a delay that goes to YouTube. There. Wow. Yeah, I don't know how this is going to work. So, yeah, sorry. I don't know how this Hangout's going to work. I'm going to have to do some more research and figure this out because YouTube, there's a delay when it comes back to me. And so basically I hear myself talk over the top of myself. So I apologize. Maybe the live chat is the way we're going to have to go today, and I'll have to try to figure out how to get the Hangouts to work for next time. I am not sure how that's going to work. It says mute. Okay, hang on. Brian says mute the YouTube video. So my YouTube video is muted right now, but it sounds to me like that's what everybody else is hearing you through. I had to mute my YouTube video so I don't hear myself chatting over the top of myself. The volume on my computer is up. All right, let me see if I'll see if my headphones can work. Check the live chat settings. One moment. You got your volume all the way up, Brian. Settings. Aha, I think I figured this out. Just one moment. I'm going to change my audio output device here. Save. All right, try talking again, Brian, if you would.
Hey, Mike.
Ah, awesome. Good, I got you. That was it. I had to change the audio output settings on my on the Hangouts.
I can echo from you though.
Are you? Okay, hang on. All right, let me see if I can get my headphones connected, and then maybe that'll take care of that. One sec. I
Hey,
apologize.
Damien. Damien read my book. I'm glad you liked it.
One moment. Sorry, trying to get my headphones connected. Boy, I'm not very well prepared for this, am I? Here we go. Same pair. All right, says I'm connected. All right, I'm going to talk through here. All right, Brian, if you would, say something again. Let me see if I can hear you through my headphones here.
Testing.
All right, hang on. Looks like just coming through my speakers. Headphones, microphone. All right, go ahead and talk one more time.
Hello.
Perfect. Am I echoing still?
Nope.
Oh, good. Good. All right. Sorry about that. All right, let me scroll up here in the comments just real quick, make sure I didn't miss something. I appreciate you guys, your patience here. Oh, Jamie, hi. What's up from Houston? Good to see familiar faces. Jessica said, oh, I can hear him. Good. Unity Quest. No, you didn't miss much. You missed a good 10 minutes of technical difficulties and me talking about supplements. So just to recap, the things that work for me, specifically 5-HTP, I found makes a huge difference in my dream. Dream intensity, and Nero Fiora says vitamin B6 will help your dream recall. That is where we are to just catch you up in a nutshell. All right. Question for you. Can we hear, smell, and talk in the astral plane? So the answer to that is yes, you absolutely can. Your senses in the astral plane work very similarly to the way that they do in the physical world. The one difference that I found is that your senses don't seem to have the same separation and distinction as they have in the physical world. So for me, if I look at something off in the distance while I'm out of body, I can also smell that thing just by intending to smell it. And so you don't have that same distinct, beginning and end of each sense that you've got in the physical world. So that's sort of an interesting difference. All right, and so then we were talking about, I had gotten to the second question, and that was how does sex affect initiating an OBE? Personally, I found that sex doesn't seem to affect my initiation process at all. The second question was, is sex possible when you're out of body? And it's definitely possible. That is actually one of the things that I think drives a lot of people towards this practice. In fact, if you do a YouTube search, you will find countless examples of people talking about having astral sex. So definitely a possibility. All right, DM Suja. Again, apologize if I mispronounce names. So there's 3 products that are coming out: the Lucid Dreamer, the transcranial alternating current stimulation to induce lucid dreaming, and then there's the Aurora via iWinks plus the iBand Plus. So what DM is talking about is he's talking about these non-autonomous methods for entering the phase. And there have been things like this. There was a headset called the Nova Dreamer, which would use a series of flashing lights to try to simulate or try to notify you when you're dreaming. The real problem with that one is, from my understanding, that it didn't have any sort of EEG type technology built into it. So it really didn't know when you were dreaming. It was more like a ramp timer where you take a guess and you set it to go off at a specific time. It blinks in your eyes. And at that point, hopefully you're dreaming, and hopefully you can recognize you're dreaming, and it'll induce lucidity. I'm actually personally excited about the Aurora eye winks. It's a Kickstarter that was put out, maybe like 3 years ago, and I supported it about 2 years ago, and it still is not fully been distributed. So I'm still waiting on mine. I should get it in the next few months. But this one is actually like an EEG, measures your brain waves, knows when you're in which state of sleep, and then intelligently tries to flash these lights in your eyes and let you know that you're dreaming, so that you can induce that lucidity. So I will definitely do a video on that once I get it. I'll let you guys know what I think of it. But that one I'm personally excited about, since it's a Kickstarter that I helped fund a couple of years back, and it's a long time in the coming, or in the works. Jessica says, how often do you astral project? I was actually going to make a video about this a little bit later this week. For the longest period of time, my success rate was about once or twice a week, and it has dropped down to about once every other week. And I won't go too much into detail on this, since that'll be my next video, but really the majority of the problems I've been having lately have been due to mental chatter, this monkey mind that just won't shut up. I'm having a hard time clearing my head, and that's particularly due to the fact that I've just gotten far too engaged in politics and all this negative news that's just, bombarding us here in the US. And there's just always something new, and some scandal and some scheme, and something going on. And it has just been increasingly hard for me to shut off my brain. And I really need to just take a break from all of that, and I need to just go back to ignoring all that negativity, and spend more time focusing on meditation. Because when I do that kind of thing, and I can shut off my mind and reach those deeper states more quickly, I have far more success. All right, have you ever noticed, Nero says, have you ever noticed any physical side effects from the phase? That's an interesting question. So physical as in changing my own physiology, I would say probably not so much. As far as changing your general attitude and outlook and just the way that you view the world, absolutely. I've got a video that I talked about that. It was like the long-term effects of practicing out-of-body experiences, where I talk about quite a bit about the things that I've experienced as an effect of going into the phase regularly. Anime manga energy. My question was, thank you. I actually have this one on my list, but I'll go ahead and tackle it now since you're online. How real does it feel in the astral realm? Does it feel like the physical realm, or even more physical, as it is solid, or can't you feel solid object solidness? Sorry, I think I read that kind of screwed up. So how real does it feel in the astral realm? So that varies. Your levels of lucidity, even in out-of-body experiences, in my own personal experience, vary. There are times where I separate too early, or I separate during these really heavy, crunchy, chunky vibrations. And when I roll out of body at that particular point in time, everything is very, very dull and very sluggish and just lethargic feeling. And it feels like my mind is clear, but my body is drunk, and I'm stumbling around with very little control, and there's very little light. And it just feels like the best way I can describe it is it still feels real, and it feels like the physical world, but it feels like you're under the influence of something. It just doesn't feel like you're in your proper state of mind, like you would be as you're walking around typically day to day. Now that's one side of this spectrum. The opposite side is it can absolutely feel just as real life. And in fact, my senses when I'm out of body tend to be even more enhanced than they are in the physical world, which then tends to lead to what some people say is like an ultra realer than physical world type experience. And that's a difficult thing to imagine unless you've experienced it yourself. But just the way that your senses interact with the environment, and the way that everything is it's far more, it's like if you spend a long time doing mindfulness meditation as you're walking around during the day, and you're just paying super close attention, and you're ultra aware to everything that's going on. It's just like that naturally when you're there. And so it feels more real, because you're just more aware, and you're not just in this tunnel vision mode where you're driving to work and don't remember how you got there. And, as we get in our normal daily lives. All right, Jessica says, I'm doing it at least 5 times a week, which if you're having success 5 times a week, then that is incredible. I'm having trouble having trouble controlling it. Now, when you say you're having trouble controlling it, are you saying that you're having trouble controlling your out-of-body state once you're out of body, or are you having trouble actually reaching the out-of-body state? Because that would be 2 different things. Can you put a link to your book in the video description? I assume that you are talking about Brian. So Brian, if you wouldn't mind, put a link to the book in the live chat. I can copy that and I'll throw it into the video description. And if you don't happen to do that, I can actually do that after the fact.
Yeah.
By the way, Brian is online with us right now. Brian Slartsani, and his book is called. Oh God, put me on the spot here. I got to remember. It is the Dynamic State. Sorry, and it was in my top 10 list of books for projection. It was one of the best ones that I've read out there. So I highly recommend it. I'll throw it in the description for this video. All right, Adrian says, do you think that you're really detaching from your body or just receiving data streams to your mind? That is a question I get, not particularly exactly like that, but that's a question I get all the time, as in, is projection real? Are you really detaching from your body, or is this just some fabrication being generated by your mind? I would love to get other people's thoughts on this. Me personally, I've done countless experiments trying to prove one way or another that it's not real or that it is real. And what I found is that I don't seem to be able to interact with the physical world. I maybe can view things that are going on in the physical world because I've done that quite a bit, and it's actually at a fairly high level of accuracy, which it's not perfect, which makes me think it could still be coincidence. But I have had zero capability to actually interact with the physical world. I know Brian, the one that we were talking about in the book of, he's done a lot of experiments where he's like reading symbols and pictures off of computer screens and various other things like that. If you feel like chiming in, Brian, sorry, I'm kind of hogging the conversation. You're welcome to chime in anytime.
All right. Yeah, I've tried to validate it. Still not pleased with my level of validation, but I'm going to continue to do it. Seems like an important thing to do. I'm not going to, spend all of my time trying to validate, because that would be a bit dull. But seems like an important question to answer is whether or not you're actually going out of your body and observing things. But when it comes to distinguishing between actually leaving the body and getting streams of input into the mind, it's still like, even if you validated something, that's still a question that wouldn't be answered, right? It'd be hard to really tell if you're just kind of reconstructing the stream in your head or if you're actually out of your head. But I believe that we are using a separate vessel to observe things out of our body when we leave when we have an out-of-body experience with astral projection. At least there are other times, like in lucid dreaming, where you can have an out-of-body experience, and of course you wouldn't be out of your body. And in sleep paralysis, I find that I'm sometimes connected to entities, and sometimes I'm like reconstructing things, or it's like influencing my hallucinations, in which case I would be still in my body and just be kind of processing input. It's really hard to process input like that, I find. I know controlled remote viewers, they don't leave their bodies. At least they're not supposed to if they want to keep it controlled. I find it's kind of, yeah, I think I mentioned this, it's kind of hard to make sense of everything when you're not out of your body, because you're still subject to your physical senses, and you have to distinguish your physical senses from the input that's coming in. Whereas with astral projection, you just have an experience and you bring it back. So I think that you can do the same thing. You can accept input and process it in your head, and you can also detach from the physical body. That's typically what astral projection assumes, is that you're leaving your physical body behind and are in an astral body in the astral plane.
Cool, thank you for that. Yeah, well said. Carlos says, Reduga recommends not trying to induce more than 3 times a week. What would be an ideal plan for daily practice? This is actually another question that I get quite a bit. And for me, what I've found is it's great to start with weekends, sometime where you can sleep in the next day, especially if you're using the wake back to bed method and you're disrupting your sleep cycle. Any sort of sleep deprivation is going to eventually lead to being discouraged with the process and lead to frustration. And frustration and discouragement is going to then kill your future attempts. So start with the weekend, or at least start with days where you can sleep in the following day. And then from there, it's really up to you how often you want to make an attempt. But I would say, again, if you get to the point where you find that you're being sleep deprived or any sort of frustration starts with the process, that's going to be counterproductive. And I would say at that point, slow down, maybe take a break if you're too frustrated, or at least, again, cut back to a couple times a week. I've gotten to the point, and I've mentioned this before, that I think the best piece of information or the best piece of advice I can give you is to learn to love the entire process. I talk to a lot of people who just get so incredibly discouraged that they made it all the way to the vibrational state and then it ended, and they're just very upset about it. And I think, if you could learn to love the relaxation process and the feeling of your body falling asleep and the feeling of your senses shutting off and the feeling of floating in that void type state, and learn to love the vibrations themselves, and if you learn to love every piece of that process, then it's not going to be such a disappointment when you don't reach an out-of-body experience. And if you do happen to get out of body, great, that's an added benefit. But for me, learning to love that whole process, really, it helped at least alleviate the frustration portion of this deal. So now I practice every day. And if I happen to be tired, then what I'll end up doing is I'll end up taking a nap during lunch, during my lunch hour, just to try to catch up on sleep, because I've gotten to the point where I just love this practice so much. I just want to do it every day. So if you can do it without sleep deprivation and frustration, do it as often as you feel like. Jessica says, I'm having trouble actually going to sleep. I get tired and just want to sleep. And that's the same problem that Robert Monroe talks about in one instance, and that is a problem I would dearly love to have. I think for so many people, this is such a difficult thing to do, that for those people who can't get it to stop, I think that we look at you guys a little bit with envy. But I'm sure it's a problem for you guys just as well. All right, let's see. All right, I'm going to read one more about question. Let's see, I'm going to read one more question that I got via email. This is an interesting one. Does anybody experience interferences with electrical fields during projection? So, like electronic appliances and wires and such. Have someone felt the magnetic sensation pull towards it, or a feeling of a different energy around it? If so, what are the possible explanations? My own personal experience in lucid dreams, I have had instances where I can't seem to fly above power lines when I'm nearby them. I don't know what that means, if it means anything at all, and it might be all just psychological or something like that. But I have never encountered any sort of issues with electrical appliances or power lines or anything like that while out of body. Not sure what the explanation behind that would be. I'd be interested in hearing if you run into scenarios like that. It wasn't apparent from the email whether or not that's something that you run into personally. Sleep paralysis and heaviness is very uncomfortable for me. Unity Quest says that. That actually ties in well to another question that I got. What do I do about the heavy chest sensation? So sleep paralysis can definitely be uncomfortable. For me personally, the most uncomfortable piece of sleep paralysis is when that wave of sleep reaches my chest. And I think it's the muscles in my chest that hold up my rib cage are releasing, to a point where I didn't even realize that I didn't realize they were engaged, but apparently they were, because at some point they start to collapse in on my lungs. And it makes it difficult to breathe. And that was incredibly uncomfortable, and it was a difficult thing for me to pass for a long time. What I found is that I'll do some deep breathing exercises as I do this progressive relaxation as I'm working on trying to get to that state to begin with. But when I get to the point where I'm trying to actually get my body to fall asleep, once I feel like I'm fairly relaxed, I'll actually start doing some fairly short and shallow breathing. And I try to move my rib cage as little as possible while I'm doing this. And I'm not trying to deprive myself of oxygen. I'm just trying to keep my breath as short and shallow as possible to avoid having to raise and lower my rib cage with my lungs. And what I've found personally is that when that wave of sleep reaches my chest and that heavy sensation that's uncomfortable hits my chest, at least that way I'm not trying to push against my rib cage, and I don't get that sense of panic or that sense that I'm going to be deprived of oxygen or that sense that I'm going to suffocate like I would if I was doing this very deep breathing. Because when I do very deep breathing and all of a sudden that weight and that pressure comes on, I start to feel like I'm going to suffocate. My heart starts pounding, my adrenaline starts rushing, and the whole experience is over. So that's the best thing I can offer is in regards to that. I'd be interested in knowing what else is uncomfortable for you in regards to sleep paralysis, if you want to post that in the chat. BPH, I didn't get to the vibrations yet, but I don't give up. Yes, don't give up. You'll get there. This is something like anything worth learning is, it takes some time. Some people have an easier time than others. Me personally, I had my very first experience just by accident, and it took me 5 months to achieve a second experience. So it's not an easy thing, especially when you haven't experienced it before. The more you experience it, the more you learn to sort of see the signposts along the way, and you can say I'm on the right track, and it's easier to make it there. But especially at the beginning, before you've got that experience under your belt, it's a difficult thing. Do you ever wake up and find that you're already partially separated, and are you able to turn that into a projection at that point? Yeah, and actually, it's a good question, and I actually am able to do that. That's sort of a variation of the indirect method. So Michael Raduga talks about the indirect method, and I actually got this idea from William Buhlman. He talks about when he first wakes up, he talks about trying to reach for things that you normally wouldn't be able to reach physically in your room. So reach for a far wall, reach your hand down and touch the floor that's out of reach. Push your hand through the floor, things like that. And I've done this on a number of occasions where I will just lay there, completely still when I wake up, intending to use the indirect method, just immediately upon awakening, where I try to project. And I'll just start focusing on stretching out my limbs further than they normally would be possible to stretch. And I've been able to reach my hand around the corner of my bed all the way down through the floor, and move my hand around in the floorboards and feel that the sensation of the boards against my fingers. And when I got to that point, at that point, what Raduga says is, he says, if you can get to that point, you're already in the phase. It's basically that you're lying on what he calls your stencil body. So you're just basically overlapped. And at that point, if I can do that, it's just like when I see through my eyelids. It's a great indicator that you can just roll right out of body and you can begin your experience. So that's my own personal experience with that. Ah, great. Spirit Noodle Soup has just joined the Hangouts. Welcome.
Howdy, howdy.
Glad you could join. We've only got 3 people in the Hangouts so far, but lots of people online just chatting in the chat box. All right, easiest trick to stay conscious. This actually ties right in with another question that I've got. I fall asleep during my attempts. How can I keep my mind awake? So there are a whole bunch of things that I've tried, and so I'll give you a bunch of ideas of things that you can try, and then other people can chime in and say, where their experience has led them. Personally, use the wake back to bed method. I would say that's the best advice I can give you, at least to start. Get 4 to 6 hours of sleep beforehand so that you're still tired, but you're not as tired. It makes it a little bit easier to maintain control over your state of consciousness. When you lay back down after the wake back to bed method, pick a spot, not your bed. Pick some place that your body doesn't associate with sleep, whether that's a couch, a recliner, a yoga mat, something other than your bed. Make sure you're not too comfortable. I personally don't ever put on blankets or sheets or anything like that. I just lay on top of everything because if I'm too warm, as anybody who's been in a long meeting in a very warm conference room knows, it leads to dozing off. Lay down in a position that is not your normal sleeping position. So if you usually sleep on your side, again, your body associates that with sleep. So lay on your back, lay in some position that's not typically associated with sleep. And actually, if you pick the same position over and over again, your body will start to associate that position with your projection attempts. Just like William Buellman talks about, pick some specific spot in the house and make that your dedicated practice room. So you have your projection couch is what he talks about. And the only time you ever lay down on that couch to close your eyes is when you're making a projection attempt. And that, again, subconsciously starts getting you to associate that location and that position with the practice of projection, and then makes your attempts more successful. A couple of other things you can practice while you're propping your arm up. If you find you just can't stay awake. If you prop your arm up like this, as you're falling asleep, your arm's going to fall, and you can just bring it back up over and over and over again, trying to get the hang of feeling and noticing that that transition from awake to asleep, and learning to try to hover right on that threshold. I also did things like I tied a lead weight to my finger, and every time I would fall asleep, my hand was hanging over the edge of the bed. That weight would fall, it would wake me up, I'd pull it back up over and over again. And then I spent at least a year practicing every day at my lunch period at work, where I would set my alarm to go off every 15 minutes, and I would just try to hover on that awake asleep threshold. And every 15 minutes, my alarm would go off just in case I happened to fall asleep. It would wake me up, and I would try again. So some of this is just repetitions and just practice. And the last thing I'll say is I found that it was actually interesting to experiment with different levels of caffeine. So caffeine obviously stimulates your mind, helps you keep your mind awake. I personally, caffeine doesn't affect my body a whole lot. I can drink a cup of coffee and I can go right to bed and I don't have a problem. But what I found is that if I induce I take various levels of caffeine. I've got an echo here from somebody. Sorry. I'm going to mute a few people here just real quick, just to see if I can find out where the echo's coming from. All right. So if I try with various levels of caffeine, what I found is that I can get my brain to stay awake more easily if I'm having a difficult time over a period. So it's great as like a training wheels type tool to practice with. Eventually, you'll find that you just don't need that crutch anymore because you kind of learn to be able to watch that transition. So that is my input on that one. Anybody else have any thoughts on how to keep your mind awake while you let your body fall asleep?
Yeah, I do. First of all, it's really great to meet you. Oh goodness, I completely forgot what the name of your channel was.
Phase Evolution.
Phase Evolution, that's right.
Welcome.
Yeah, so I do a lot of, so me and a friend, we do a ton of dreaming, and the kid that I do dreaming with is with an astral projection. He actually like spends years in the astrals, and that's like something I'm working up to, but I'm at the point where like I'm trying to get to like learning how to travel, because to me it's really easy to astral project, lucid dream. And I do that kind of similar to how you do it. I just sleep 18 hours a day, as much as I can. And then inevitably, you know, you reach that state where you're really lucid, and then you're able to control your dream or the astral projection. But for me, like I'm learning how to control the dream force, where you're like, okay, I summon, for me it works like I say something like, I summon a portal to da-da-da-da. And then like an invisible force will just like kind of sweep me to a destination. But I don't know, have you experienced, like how do you navigate the astrals?
Honestly, usually fly. Flying is by far my favorite thing to do. Something I've been working on over the last 6 months is learning to teleport, which was something that it didn't come easily to me at all. Like I would try to do it and nothing would happen, or I would just end up ruining my experience. I'd get sucked back to my body and it would be over. And then somebody, forgive me, I can't remember who it was. Somebody on my channel said, you know, what you should do is you should start out looking at things off in the distance and then see yourself at that location. But pick something that you can see. Don't try to, you know, go to Egypt. Don't try to go to Mars. Just pick something that you can see. And so I worked with that, and that was tons easier to actually just, you know, see something, close my eyes, say I'm going to be there, open my eyes, and I was there. And something about having it off in the distance made a huge difference for me. That was a good practice technique.
Yeah, I might have mentioned on your channel to pick a object in the distance and then pick a point to the left or right of it and then project to that point using like stretch out or something like that.
Yeah, I think that was it. Yeah.
Yeah. Stretch out tends to work for me. That's the Robert Monroe technique of teleporting. I had one that I don't remember the name to, but I developed one that allows me to do something similar to what stretch out achieves. It's all about these like abstract things that you do with your body or your mind to catapult you to the new location. And I would recommend looking into Robert Monroe's stretch out technique. It seems to work pretty well for him, and it worked well for me.
Awesome, thanks. Oh, good. We got somebody new joining. Laxus and Emma, Jessica, welcome to the Hangouts. Let's see. Oh, go ahead.
The guy who asked about the movement, you know, you have him muted, I think.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
There we go. Yeah, dude. Yeah, one thing I'm trying to learn to do is to create portals too, because there's some abstract places like Avalon, Asgard, the moon and stuff like that, where the only way you can get there is either through teleporting or portaling or having a dream force take you there. So like have you guys ever had an experience where you were able to like not get to a place that you weren't able to fly to?
Yeah, sure. I have. And actually, it's similar to the idea of portals, but it's more like I've only gone through one portal in my life. It was like the entrance to my attic, and it looked like this big black empty space. I flew in through there, and I ended up several states away at my parents' house. But typically, if I want to travel somewhere, what I found is that if I'm not using teleportation, I can just say, you know, when I walk around this corner, or when I walk through this door, or when I, you know, go through this window, I'm going to be in some other place. And I suppose that's a similar thing to teleportation. It's more like just manifesting myself to a new location just through intent, just saying I'm going to be here. If you've ever read Frank Keppel, he says that one of the biggest mistakes that people make in traveling is that they try to actually travel somewhere. And he said there's no reason to travel anywhere. You can just be somewhere. You don't have to walk somewhere or fly somewhere. It's very different than travel in the physical world. And there's no reason to actually cover a distance from point A to point B. You just say, I'm going to be here and I'm here.
FaZe, I'd like to add that if you were to get avid with something like the stretch out and you start doing stretch outs everywhere, like I've done this too, I got so used to it that I was using it for all kinds of movements. I would not gradually move from point A to point B, and what happens is it messes up the continuity of the experience. Like you can't remember it, and it might even destabilize the experience if you do it too much. So I do recommend using stretch out for like longer distances, or just like to do it casually every now and then. But to rely on that sort of movement or just teleporting everywhere, it does mess up the continuity of the experience.
Hey guys.
Cool. Yeah.
So, like, so noob.
Sorry, I can barely hear you.
Sorry, wrong mic.
Oh, okay. All right, let's see. So let me look to see if there's any more questions in here. I'm using the indirect method. How do I train my mind to stay awake upon awakening? So if you're using the indirect method and you're familiar with Michael Raduga's techniques and his writing, basically he gives you two different scenarios. One is you wake up after you're doing, you've slept a little while, you're intending to use the indirect method to separate. And when you wake up, if you miss that transition from asleep to awake where you can just separate, and you're cycling through techniques, or you're doing some sort of meditation or sleep breathing, or focusing on dreams you previously had, trying to get back to that threshold where you can separate. If you're falling asleep, then you need to be more intense or more more aggressive in your approach. You need to keep your mind busier as opposed to whatever you're doing. If you're not falling asleep and you find that you just wake up and you're ending up far too awake, then again pull back on that aggression a little bit. A lot of this is just practice, and it's just it's learning to find that balance. It's sort of a balancing act, to be sure. Hazel said, "Oh yeah, go ahead."
I was just wanted to ask if the indirect method is the same thing as like sleeping, and then once you wake up, it says remain as like try to stay in the same place where you wake up and try not to move, and then keep trying to do like rollouts and stand ups. That was like the only successful time that I had like an astral projection. It was so terrible. It lasted for 5 seconds, and then I just popped back into my body.
Yeah, so to answer your question, that is exactly what it is. Sorry, I use the terminology, the indirect method and the direct method, because Raduga coined those terms, and I really like his approach to everything. And so I tend to use those terms. But the indirect method is when you wake up, what you'll find is that if you can develop this reflex to immediately focus on projecting and separating during the waking up process, and just make that your first waking thought, a lot of times you can catch the transition between asleep and awake, and you can just immediately initiate an out-of-body experience. You can just roll out during the waking up process without any sort of special techniques or anything like that. And then the idea is that if you miss that transition, you've still already gone through all of the relaxation that you normally would do with the mind awake, body asleep state, because you just woke up. So you were far more relaxed than you are during the physical waking life. And so at that point, it's much easier to return back to that awake asleep threshold where you can make that separation. And you can do that a number of different ways. There's a bunch of different techniques you can go through. You can start focusing on things like phantom wiggling, moving your non-physical body. You can start focusing on things that are like motion-based techniques, like the rope technique, or pretend you're on a roller coaster and you're doing loops. You can. One of the things I found really recently that actually works really well for me is you just hold completely still. You continue to breathe as though you were sleeping. So if you're familiar with the way that you sound when you breathe while you're asleep, you can try to continue with that same breathing pattern. And I just think intently on a dream that I just woke up from, because typically when I wake up, I just came out of a dream. And what I found is that seems to work better for me than anything else I've found so far. If I continue with sleep breathing, remain completely still, and think about a dream that I just had, more often than not, the process will just kick off on its own. I start hearing this pulsating static, this zump, zump, zump type noise. It builds into this roar. The vibrations start, and I can separate. So as you mentioned, you said this is the only experience you've had. For me, it accounts for probably 70% of my experiences, because it is, for me, by far the easiest way to do this. The direct method is great, and it feels like I've got more control, and it's great to feel like I induced the entire process from start to finish. But it tends to lead to frustration for a lot of people, because you have to reach this level of relaxation that typically only comes with sleep. And that's not an easy thing to learn to do. The other thing is that you end up going through a lot more of the sensations, like the heavy chest sensation that we talked about earlier, and these other things that you just completely avoid if you use the indirect method. So it's an easier place to start for a lot of people.
I can hear you.
All right, let's see.
FaZe, can you hear? There's someone else talking on the.
No, I can't. I can hear you.
Okay, yeah. So FaZe can't hear you, but I can.
Oh, that's weird.
I think it's because you had her muted because of the static sound.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I probably did. Is it Jessica talking?
Yeah.
Oh, Jessica, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was getting an echo, so I lowered your volume. I apologize. What's up?
That's okay. That's okay. This is the first time I had to download the Hangout app. So.
Oh, gotcha.
I have a question for you. I know you did a video on you trying to get proof, and you said you went to see your father.
Yes.
Have you tried that again, and where have you got with that?
I have tried interacting with people on a number of occasions. Typically my wife, because she's right there and it's easier for me to interact with her. One of the things that you'll find as you get out of body more and more often is that it's not always easy to get to where you're going, or get to where you intended to go, or to find the people you intended to find. At least I still have trouble with that.
Right.
And so if I pick somebody that's close to home, like in this case, my wife or my kids, you know, it's easier for me to experiment with that. And I've done a dozen different experiments where I, you know, tried to get my wife's attention by grabbing onto her or pinching her, or, you know, things like that. My most recent one, I actually tried to pull my daughter out of body because I would love to have the experiences like that Tom Campbell talks about.
Right.
So if you've ever read Tom Campbell, he talks about how his son and he, when his son was really young, they would go on these adventures where they would be out of body together, and they would both remember these experiences completely separate without, you know, prompting from the other. And I thought, how incredible would that be? And so I actually went into my daughter's room and I tried to pull her out of body. And she said, "Dad, I just want to sleep. Leave me alone." And so I quit, and then I just went and I flew around. But you know, talking to her the next day, she didn't remember it. Talking to my wife, she never remembers it either. What I've seen is that I'm able to see things that are really going on in the physical world, typically, and I've watched things happen, and the next day I've been able to verify that those things have happened. But they're things that are like routine, that I know that they happen every night, and so it's really difficult for me to say, did that really or, you know, did I really witness that, or did I just know that that happened because that always happens, you know, my kid's bedtime routine or whatever it is.
Right.
So it's difficult. It's definitely there is some synchronicities or some coincidence, but just not enough for me to be able to definitively say, yes, this is something that really happened, or that I really was able to witness, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I'm a big skeptic, so I told
I am too.
my brother and my sister about it, and they're very understanding and very open-minded. So my brother said, if you can come to my house and tell me what's on my front step, mind you, he lives in California and I live in Ohio. He said, I will believe you. So I've been trying to do that, and I can't get there. I haven't been able to get proof. So
I think that's not I don't think that's something you should ever be disappointed about. There's people like, well, so like Robert Monroe, for example, there's a number of different experiments where he tried to say, you know, what was going on in a room or read a number or something. And here's a guy who's been doing this for 3 decades, and he still couldn't consistently do it, or he couldn't get all of the facts right. He could get some things, but not other things. If you've ever read Explorations in Consciousness by Frederick Ardema, he's got the same kind of thing where he dedicates a whole chapter to all of these different experiments he did. And his success rate is like less than chance would just provide. And there's some times where he's just right on, and other times where he's just so completely far off that you wonder, well, it could have just been luck the other time. So it definitely, like Brian said earlier, it requires more testing, and it's definitely an interesting thing to test, but I'm not convinced at this point, I suppose.
I haven't read anything about anyone having an experience where they've been doing this their whole life. I actually have been doing this since I was a teenager, as far back as I can remember. So let's say like 20, 30 years. And I just a couple weeks ago had what I'm calling an awakening. I think I told you this, where I just realized what I was doing, because I thought I was dreaming. And then I don't know if I told you this, but my mother passed away probably about 8 years ago. And she was the one who came to me and pretty much woke me up and said, "Hey, wake up." And ever since then, it's crazy. That's why I told you, it's happening all the time. I have had a guide speak to me. I've had so many experiences that my mind is blown right now. Like, I'm trying to gauge all this and understand it. So this is very new, but I've watched every documentary possible out there about astral projection, and been reading a lot of books. So it's just kind of, it's very new to me. I'm only a couple weeks into actually understanding it. So I appreciate people like you that talk about it, because I would be lost. So
well, I'd say take advantage of the successes that you're having, because like I said, there's a lot of people who would just die to be able to do what you're doing. I mean, and it comes naturally to you, and it's to the point where you're like, well, I would rather just sleep and have this thing leave me alone.
I want to sleep.
But there's so many people that would just love to have that problem.
I get it. I see a lot of people that are trying, that have never done it and are trying to learn how to do it. But it scared the crap out of me the other day when that guy talked to me. I mean, it was like somebody was there with me in my room. I mean, he hugged me.
Yeah.
And it felt like my husband rolled out over and hugged me. I mean, that's how real it was. It was crazy.
I've had that same experience where somebody climbs in bed behind me and spoons me, and that was
Yes.
that was bizarre.
But when he talked to me, it wasn't like people say they can hear, like telepathically, like they just know it's in their head. I heard his voice like it was my husband's next to me. I felt the warmth on my ear. Like that's the crazy part about it. And he was singing to me like he was funny. Like he was singing a song from the 90s. He was like, back to life, back to reality. I swear to God. And I was like, what is going on? And then yes, God. He goes, I'm a guide. And I haven't come across him yet. I mean, this just happened a week ago, but it's pretty intense because I'm excited to meet him again. Like I want to know what is going on. So
yeah, well, take advantage of it. Learn as much as you can from it because, like I said, you got a gift.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'll be quiet now so other people can ask questions. Sorry.
All right, so Augustine says, do you think binaural beats are more than just a placebo? So if you know how binaural beats work, the actual science behind binaural beats is not a placebo. It's actually two different tones being played, one in each ear, and then the difference in those tones creates a wavering type frequency in your head. And that's that sound, that frequency that is wavering is generated by your mind. Now, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by placebo. I found that binaural beats can do a really good job of helping me lower my brain waves to things like the theta range and helps improve my my meditation. I can get to deeper states more quickly. As I've mentioned before, I have a really hard time projecting with anything and playing in my ears. It just seems to distract me and keep me sort of bound to the physical body because what I'm trying to do, my goal is to get as much disassociation from my physical senses as possible. And when I've got things playing in my ears, I have a problem with that. So I typically wear earplugs and an eye mask to try to just completely disassociate myself from physical senses. Does the spikes in the shaman resonance affect your astral projection? I'm sorry, I actually am not familiar with Schumann resonance. That's one I'm gonna have to look up. If anybody else has ideas, that's great. I'm not familiar with a Schumann resonance. Let's see. Have you met your guides in the astral? I have met a number of people in the astral, and a number of them have actually had advice or had information that they've given me or helped me see things from a different perspective, or helped me overcome some challenge that I was having. So I guess that you could call those guides, but in the sense like Robert Monroe talks about, where he's got one single entity that he spends like experience after experience after experience with year after year, and it's the same entity. I typically don't run into the same one more than once, and so it's doesn't mean they can't be guides, I suppose, but I don't have the same experience where I just have one dedicated person that I just see regularly. I tend to see a wide variety of folks.
For the placebo thing, I think the placebo effect was like some experiment that was conducted. Well, it's basically this group of patients. They give them pills to cure some sort of disease. I don't know.
Okay.
They were given those pills just for a short while, and then afterwards they just kept giving them candy, and even though their medicine changed, what they ate changed, the effect persisted. So basically, believing that they're consuming those pills that heal them, just believing in that's what created the effect. So
I guess the thought with the placebo or with the binaural beats is maybe if you did an experiment where you listen to some kind of calming meditative type music that doesn't have binaural beats in it, and then you measure your brainwave state, like say with an EEG or something, and then you do it with binaural beats, you could compare the two and see if there's a difference in the brainwave state, and see if you can generate that frequency following response that binaural beats is supposed to generate. I guess is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is actually science behind that. And actually, a friend of mine, a guy named Guy, I actually did a chat with him a while back, He did his dissertation in college on binaural beats and the way that they affect your brain. And he actually had an EEG that he hooked up to various people while they listened to various types of frequencies and tones. And he experimented with binaural beats. He experienced it with isochronic tones, which is similar to binaural beats, but it's more a pulsating sound rather than two different sounds in each ear. And he was able to prove that they actually do have an impact on your brain, and that you do have what they call the frequency following response, where your mind tries to move its brain waves down or up to match the frequency that's being generated through the binaural beats. So there is science behind that. That is more than just a placebo effect.
Now, here's a curious thing. What if we don't rely on the ears for, binaural beats, and instead we have, I don't know, binaural lights for your eyes, and each eye receives different frequencies? Same effect.
That's an interesting question. I've never heard of anything like that being experimented with. It would be an interesting thing to cover.
Yeah.
Let's see. Rob Vita says, have you ever shared an astral experience with someone on the physical and both of you were able to both fully recall and discuss the experience? No, I have not. This is a tricky thing to do. I talked a little bit ago about trying to get a hold or get people's attention in the physical while I'm out of body, but in order for what you're proposing to happen, you would have to have two people that are proficient enough at projecting to be able to get out of body at the same time, preferably in a close proximity to each other, because it's not always that easy to find each other once you're out of body. And you'd have to both project at the same time. You both would have to have an experience, and then you'd have to come back and talk about it. This kind of thing is documented. Tom Campbell and a couple of other folks did this kind of thing working with Robert Monroe in the early days when he was setting up his Monroe Institute. But this isn't something I've ever done. Me personally, I'm not proficient enough to just lay down and just project on will. I have between 1 and 2 experiences a week. Lately, I've been having actually even trouble getting to that sort of success rate. And so it would be a lot of luck involved to try to get 2 people to be out at the same time, unless you got some people that were far more proficient than I am. And then again, I'd have to find someone else who can do that as well. And I don't know anybody in this vicinity. I actually have no friends that do this. All of my friends are you guys that I meet through my channel. So that is not something I've been able to successfully do.
Yeah, I'll actually tell you how you can do that. What my friend and I do is when you astral project and you want to take someone with you, so you both experience it together, you both have to either hold each other's hand or connect in some way. And then when you astral project, you have to kind of pull them with you, just like you were trying to bring your daughter out.
Yeah.
It's just you both have to be touching in some way, and then you can enter the same place. But usually you have to be holding on to them during the whole experience. Yeah,
that would be incredibly helpful. I'd be interested in hearing, do you have the same sort of problems finding people and I guess keeping your intent from the waking state to the astral state? So what I find is that when I get out of body, a lot of times the things that I intended to do just suddenly don't seem as important to me. And so I'll have this plan of action in mind. And then when I get out of body, something else will come. Somebody will come and interrupt my train of thought, and they'll say, hey, let's go do this, or let me show you this, or I'll just get completely distracted by something in the out of body state. And I just completely lose track of what I originally was meant to do. And so having somebody close like that would definitely help, but I'd be interested in hearing if that's a common occurrence or if that's just me.
Yeah, that does happen a lot. There is a different mindset, or sometimes even as you go into different experiences, parallel lives, you get different memories that are implanted in your mind. How I see it is your mind is just switching energetic bodies. It's not really people think that the soul is leaving the body, but the way I see it is my mind is just flipping to a different energetic body that is existing somewhere else where I last left it. That's kind of what Carlos Castaneda talks about, the energy, reconnecting to the energetic body. And so, whenever I astral project and I appear in my room, it's because I left my energetic body in the room last time, or I visualized it to my room. But other times, you know, my friend, he leaves his astral, his energetic body in a certain place, which he calls Veil Sanctum. It's a hub of portals that lead to all sorts of mythological places that exist. But he literally leaves his energetic body there, and every night he just goes to the same place and like lives a continuous life. You know, and he's got to the point where he can bilocate. Like during the day, he'll tell me what's going on in Veil Sanctum, and he'll talk about like the governments that are going on, the people they're interacting with, the wars. And so my goal, the reason why I can, you know, I don't lose focus is because like I have this goal to continuously reach a certain place, and because if I can do that, I can develop rapport with certain beings, you know, meet the same being over and over again, get familiar with the place, and then use that as a jumping point to other places, you know. So it's kind of about finding orientation in the astral places, because like you say, a lot of times we just have these experiences and they're very sporadic and non-connected. But I think, you know, if your intent's strong enough, you can begin to meet the same guides. I think the goal, like what he did is when he told me that when he started astral projecting lucid dreaming, he focused on one guide, which he called his alternate. Okay. Which was an alternate of himself that was, you know, that was very dark, but very aggressive and very powerful, which he needed in order to kind of overcome a lot of the fighting that happens in some of the places where he visits. But but what we're doing is we're like connecting with one prime guide, and then we're getting to one specific place, and that specific place. And yeah, and so as we do that, you know, we can learn actually, because, you know, a lot of people don't know it, but there are civilization libraries, wars, and, you know, all sorts of civilizations existing in Dreamscape. And another thing that, you know, I'd love to hear your guys' opinion about as well, or experiences. But for me, the more I astral project, the more I realize that dreaming and astral projection, lucid dreaming, are like almost the exact same thing. Like whether I go into a lucid dream or whether I astral project, it's like, you know, you will have mind projections that you have to see through. And, you know, sometimes your mind can create these realities as well. But like, for me, there's like, it's all.
Oh, I think we lost you. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think I don't hear Spirit Noodle Soup anymore. I think we got cut off. So he was talking about the how he's finding that lucid dreams, and projections are all sort of the same thing. I'll say that there are definitely similarities between them. And when he said he was talking about mind projections, what I assume, or what I could relate to, at least with that, is that when I have a lucid dream, it's similar to an out-of-body experience, but what I end up having is, with a lucid dream, I still have this nonsensical type dream scenario going on around me. And it still feels very dreamlike. So maybe if that's a mind projection and I'm out of body, but I'm stuck in this mind projection, and that's what makes it real versus not real, I can completely relate to that. I would say that my out-of-body experiences are far more realistic feeling than my lucid dreams, but that tends to be just because of the physical sensations that occur before the separation. The fact that I'm awake during the separation just tends to have that added level of reality that it adds to it. And it feels like I don't have any lapse in consciousness from the initiation of the separation to the experience to the return. So definitely could be varying levels on the spectrum of consciousness, but for me, they do feel different.
If there, an interesting little thought. If you said that you can like see what's going on in the house, as your daughter saying what she said when you tried to pull her out. Maybe that was a real thing, and you confirmed that it's a thing that's happened. Well, if it happened while you were astral projecting, that means then it's what you're seeing is the physical 3D world. That means you can't modify it. You can't like instantly grow a tree or something. But in lucid dreaming, you can modify it. That means that lucid dreaming is totally not astral projection. maybe, I guess.
Yeah, and that might go into what he was talking about with these mind projections as well, or this I forget what he said. I think mind projections, because if you in a lucid dream, you're in a dream type state, you're in a dream type scenario where anything like that is possible. So there's distinctions for sure, but as I mentioned before, I haven't been able to prove one way or another that the entire thing is anything other than just a very convincing hallucination. So I can't say. I remain a skeptic until I actually see some more concrete proof, I suppose. Faith, Hope, and Love says, have you ever zoomorphed to become like a dolphin or a wolf? I have never become any sort of animal, no. I tend to have a physical form when I'm out of body, but it doesn't even have it. It's more like a silhouette of a physical form. I don't tend to even look like myself, but it's always humanoid in form. Let's see. Another question somebody sent in through email. Have you ever tried 4-7-8 breathing as a method for falling asleep quickly? Also, could this be useful to achieve sleep paralysis? So 4-7-8 breathing, if you're not familiar with it, this is the idea is that you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 7 seconds, you breathe out for 8 seconds. And you can do different variations of this, different timings. You can also add a breath hold after you've exhaled. So you can breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 7, breathe out for 8 seconds, hold with no air in your lungs for 4 seconds. And that deep controlled breathing can help you relax very quickly. And I found that this kind of thing is helpful for meditation. It's great for doing my pre-projection type attempt, full body relaxation. But as I did mention before, once I get to the point where I'm actually going to try to put my body to sleep and make an attempt, I have to move to very shallow, short breaths, or else I end up with that heavy chest sensation, and that'll just distract me and cause panic and make me feel like I'm suffocating. So I don't do any sort of really deep or any sort of really deep type breath techniques while I'm making my projection attempt, I suppose. Are you familiar with Tom Campbell's theory of everything? Yes, the Big Toe trilogy. It's really good. I actually particularly like the first one where he talks about his interaction with Bob Monroe and how he first met him. He calls him the Wizard of Whistlefield, and he's trying to determine whether or not he's really into what he's talking about, or if he's just trying to make money. And he ends up volunteering to be a subject to help him with his experiments in return for Bob Monroe teaching him to reach the out-of-body state. If you haven't read Tom Campbell's stuff, it's great. I would highly recommend it. Have you tried any Hemisync or CDs or pills like 5-HTP or melatonin? Yeah, so the very first question we talked about was supplements. 5-HTP works really well for me for crazy intense and lucid dreams. Melatonin kind of leaves me with a hangover type feeling in the morning, and I don't really like it. Hemisync, I listened to the Wave 1 CD from the Monroe Institute as I do morning meditations. I'll wake up at 3 a.m. and I'll go through my my wake back to bed method. And I've been using the Wave 1 CD. It's got some Hemisync in the background, which is basically just binaural beats, but it's buried in some white noise, and it's got Bob Monroe talking over the top of it. It's sort of a guided meditation, and it's one that I just like and that I'm familiar with, and that it's one of my favorite ones. So I tend to do that every morning about 3 a.m. I wouldn't say there's anything magical about Hemisync. You can find anything that'll keep your attention well enough to keep you conscious and aware. You don't want to fall asleep during these early morning meditations. That is kind of counterproductive. But if it's anything that keeps your mind engaged enough to keep you awake, but not so engaged to the point where you're wide awake and you can't kind of hover right on that awake asleep threshold, then it'll work fine. I don't think there's anything magical specifically about Hemisync. But 5-HTP I would recommend trying. I thought it's an interesting thing. It hasn't helped me with my OBEs, but it has definitely given me some crazy dreams. Is it possible to project to the edge of the universe and see what's there? It's from Unity Quest. I have never personally projected further than the moon. I've walked around on the moon once, and that is as far as I've made it. So whether or not it's possible, I'm sure it's possible, but probably by somebody who's more advanced than I am. Making portals is actually an excellent idea. Yeah, actually, that's the comment right underneath Unity quests, and maybe you can make a portal to the edge of the universe. That would be an interesting thing to experience. Have you ever experienced an astral entity refer to any of you as a temporary visitor? Oh, that's an interesting comment. I've had experiences where I run into people who claim to have passed. So in my experience, there's a few different types of people I've run into when I'm out of body. There are people who are still in the physical, who they seem to be going about their physical life, but I can see what they're doing. And an example of that would be my wife or my kids. There are people that I run into that seem to just exist in the out-of-body state, and that's all. They don't seem to have a counterpart on Earth, and they seem to just be living in this astral state. And they seem to know me very well, and I seem to have this sense of familiarity when I run into them. And it's kind of an interesting thing, because you just have this, I have the sense that I should know this person and that we're familiar and that we're friends, but I just can't remember where they're from. It's like having something on the tip of your tongue and you just can't remember it. But I interact with these people, and they tend to just live in the out-of-body state. The next type of people I've run into are non-human type entities that I've run into in the out-of-body state. And then the fourth set are the people who claim to have used to have existed on the physical plane, who now are only in the out-of-body state. And those are the people who tend to ask me what I'm doing there. Everybody else just seems to accept the fact that you're there or not notice that you're there. But I have had instances where people that I run into who say, yes, I used to live on Earth and now I'm dead and now I'm here. They say, what are you doing here? Or they're surprised to find you there because they know that you're not supposed to be there. So that's my experience. There tends to be at least, I think those are the four types of entities that I run into.
I have a little question. Have you ever tried to interact with the animals? I heard that's really easy.
I tried to interact with my cat. That's the only animal I've ever tried to interact with, and I completely freaked him out. He was sitting there at his food dish and he was eating, and I came up behind him and I touched him, and he, did his hissing and his cat type screaming at me and ran down the stairs and then hid under a couch. And that was my only interaction with an animal. So he didn't like it, but I haven't ever tried with anything else.
You know what you should do? You should check if your cat actually got scared and ran.
I should set up like a camera or something like that, make another attempt and see if I can videotape my cat while I make an attempt. That would be that would actually be some cool verification. Let's see. Do you know anything about Reincarnation Trap? Robert Monroe talks about something that he sort of describes as the Reincarnation Trap, where every time you leave, you kind of just come back in and you get stuck in this loop where you're going around and around and around until you finally get to the point where you no longer are able to gain anything, I suppose, out of this life, and then you can break out of that reincarnation cycle. I don't know much more about it than that. I think Robert Monroe is the only one I've ever heard of talk about what he didn't call it the Reincarnation Trap, but this cycle of endless reincarnation. That's all. I don't know much about that, no. Do you feel fully rested after a night of out-of-body experiences, or do you feel like you've had a bad night's sleep, like you've had a late night sort of thing? I feel great after I have an out-of-body experience, and I've talked to a lot of other people who have confirmed that they have the same sort of experience. I feel energized. I have far more energy than I do during a normal night's sleep, and part of that is the excitement of just having had this adventure, and part of it is the adrenaline, and I don't know what else it is, but just this overwhelming positive sense of this sensation that just sticks with me all day long. So no, I don't feel unrested at all, because if you think about it, your body is still sleeping at that point, so your body's still getting the rest that it needs. So I don't think that once you're in this out-of-body state, I don't think there's any negative impact as far as your sleep cycle goes. All right, reading through more comments here. I've tried the indirect method for almost 200 times in the last 2 years, but haven't even gotten to the vibrational state. Do you have any good advice? I'm not falling asleep. Just wake up and try it. So I've got a few thoughts on that. First of all, maybe the indirect method won't work for you. There's lots of different techniques and everybody's different. If you've tried it 200 times without success, then either it's not going to work for you or there's some flaw in your practice. So I would say try a different time. Try waking up at different times of night. I actually experimented with 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. I started at midnight and sort of worked my way forward and backward, and I took notes every time, just trying to figure out what timing in the night and how much sleep I needed beforehand, what worked for me best. If you decide you want to try something else, I would say try the direct method instead of the indirect method. Still use the wake back to bed method. Still go to sleep for 4 to 6 hours, because that's beneficial regardless of what technique you're going to use. But then try to use the mind awake, body asleep state. Try to lay there and try to let your body relax to the point where you can let your body fall asleep, and try using that type of technique. I would say that one of the best things that you can learn how to do if you're having trouble reaching a vibrational state is practice micro sleep. I made a video on that a while back, and I use that religiously. It's one of the only ways I can get my body to a relaxed enough state to get this process to continue most of the time. And what that is it's not, it's not falling asleep for a long period of time. What it is it's just dipping into sleep for just a very brief second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and just pulling yourself back out. And this takes some practice. And for me, it was best to practice during the day when I'm not tired, because then I've got a little more control and it's easier for me to wake myself back up. But what you want to do is you just want to dip in and out of sleep over and over and over again. And at some point, if you can remain completely still during this process, it'll be your mind that comes back from sleep, leaving your body still asleep. And it'll kick off that mind awake, body asleep process. And then you can just remain in that state. And eventually your senses start to shut down, and you'll end up in this void type state where you wouldn't be able to tell what position your body's in if you wanted to. Your sense of your sight kind of shuts off, and the normal lights and colors and images that you see behind your closed eyelids kind of just shut off completely, and you're just in complete darkness. Your hearing becomes sort of deadened, as if your ears are shutting off to the
Faze, you muted yourself, I think.
Oh, somebody else muted me. Can you guys hear me? Hello?
I can hear you.
All right. I think somebody else muted me. Actually, last time we had one of these chats, somebody joined the chat, kicked everybody else out, and ended the conversation.
That is very odd architecture.
I'm sorry. I thought I only muted you towards myself. So funny, sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. Glad to know it was intentional, that somebody wasn't just trying to get me to shut up.
Sorry.
All right, so I don't know when I got muted, but basically I would say practice micro sleep. Check out my video on that if you're not familiar with it. Learn to dip in and out of sleep repeatedly, and it'll a lot of times kick that process off. If anybody else has any thoughts or comments on that, feel free to contribute. That's my 2 cents.
We're commenting on how that guy was not getting any success from like 200 attempts at that one.
Yeah. So sorry, I should have noticed I was on mute. I don't know how long I was just talking to myself, but he sounds like he's been trying for 2 years, mostly with the indirect method, and he can't get to the vibrational state.
Well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking, I don't know exactly how many different techniques he's using, but anything over 20 techniques and if you're using the same technique 20 times in a row and it doesn't work, you might as well move on to another one. Anything over that is just kind of, I mean, you don't know if that's ever going to work, so you could be spending a lot of time with that technique. But again, I'm not sure if that's what he's doing, if he's mixing in any other techniques, but I do recommend mixing it up if it's not already mixed up.
You know, a good point
Yeah.
that somebody else threw in here is that vibrations don't typically occur with the indirect method. And I can second that they don't occur to the same level that they do occur with the direct method. So with the direct method, where you're feeling that entire process from start to finish, I tend to get much heavier, much more intense vibrations. And with the indirect method, what I feel is more like I'm moving through, like I'm moving through a waterfall of vibrations on my way out. It's much less like the long, drawn out sense of really heavy vibrations that I feel when I'm going through with the direct method and putting my body to sleep and seeing that entire process start to finish. So that is a good point. You won't see the same level, at least if you're on par with myself, you won't see the same level of vibrations that you feel with the direct method.
Also, you want to look into like what are you classifying, you know, as a success, because for years, you know, I tried astral project. Actually, it was, yeah, I've been wanting to astral project since 2011, and it took years for me to like actually get my first experience. But yeah, after like I have been astral projecting, but I've never classified it as an astral projection because I was just like, oh, it's just a lucid dream, you know. Oh, I was just, you know, dreaming basically. I didn't feel the vibrations, but then I realized that. In my case, like when I first started astral projecting, I felt the vibrations, and then after a while, just doing it daily, building it up to daily, it's almost like second nature. And so, yeah, so like when you do, so a lot of times you just have to think to yourself, is this, and you know, thing that I could be astral projecting like every day. It's just that I'm just not classifying it, you know. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just feel like more people astral project than they realize, and they're just calling it dreaming or lucid dreaming. But
I've heard people refer to what you're talking about as unconscious projections as well. And I have to say, I don't think I've experienced that. And if I have, I just don't recognize that I've experienced it, because projections are such a distinct and profound experience for me. But I have heard other people refer to what you're saying.
Unconscious projections are more common with people like me who have the sleep paralysis. I wouldn't want to call it an issue, but it's a reoccurring thing. I enter sleep paralysis quite a bit. And I mean, it's pretty hard to just stay in sleep paralysis all the time. Like when it happens, it's not pleasant. And instinctively, you want to get away from the hallucinations. It's usually not pleasant. So, I mean, instinctively, you'd want to get away from it. And I find there's a lot of people out there that have physical bodies that from the get-go put them in the right physiological state so that they can actually exit their physical body pretty easily. And that's where the unconscious projections typically stem from, I find. Like if you're using techniques and whatnot and you're trying to articulate how you get out and all that, that's probably just going to lead to conscious projections, right?
Yeah, good point. Thank you. Phil Schmidt says, do you ever have lucid dreams? And if you have, ever used one as an AP? Yes, so I have lucid dreams all the time. That actually becomes more and more frequent as my projection practice continues, because a lot of the things that you do to try to prepare yourself for projection also are beneficial for lucid dreaming. So my lucid dreaming life is more active than it has ever been in the past. And you can definitely use those to project. I've heard of different techniques for doing this. Personally, what I do is that I tend to try to enjoy the lucid dream as long as it's going to last. And then as I feel the lucid dream ending, it's a great scenario where you have more control over the speed at which you wake up. So when you wake up normally, you're asleep, then you're awake, and sometimes it's a very abrupt transition where you don't notice the time that happens between that sleeping and waking. But with a lucid dream, I tend to be able to notice the entire process of me sort of fading out of a dream and then fading into waking life. And during that transition, I can immediately start rolling or start climbing or start, moving frantically to get out of body or to raise up. And typically I pick like a log rolling type motion, similar to what Monroe talks about. And during that transition out of that lucid dream, I can actually roll right out of body and move from a lucid dream to a projection. So that's the way that I use a lucid dream to initiate a projection. And I know other people do different things, but for me personally, that's what I do. I try to enjoy the lucid dream as long as possible, then take advantage of the exit. Have you ever visited the Akashic Library? No, I have not. So the Akashic Library, if you're not familiar, is supposed to be sort of this database of information that has every event from past, present, and future, every bit of information you possibly could ever want to know. And you could tap into this information and learn anything. I've been to what people called a transfer point when I was talking to people in this location. And this transfer point was sort of like a library, but it basically had lots of pictures around the walls of places that I could go by going through these pictures, and they would act as portals. But it didn't feel at all like a source of all knowledge. It was more like more geared towards transportation rather than that. I'm not sure where the Akashic records are or how to access them.
That's really cool, dude. I actually was like astral projecting too, and like I found and I asked her, I was like, okay, I want to get to so-and-so. Is there like a transport tube you guys have or something? And then she called someone on a phone. The dispenser gave it to me and told me to like tap it on a tree nearby. So there was like this bubble that appeared. It was like down, and it like basically teleported me to this new place where I was like seeing these huge crystal cities like in the sky, these dwarf people, and it was just very interesting. So that's really cool.
Yeah, very cool. All right, there seems to be over. Oh, I'm good. Go ahead, Brian.
Spear, did you say you answered a phone and then you were like teleported by the phone to a new place?
Found this what looked like a police lady, and she was like talking on a phone when I was astral projecting. I said, hey, I'm looking to get to a certain place, Veil Sanctum, a teleport tube that can transport me. And so she called someone else, okay, and then got this key out of a dispenser and then gave it to me and told me to tap it on a tree. And so I was like, okay. So I used this key, and when I did that, it faded out. It went from like, it went from black, like everything like went black very slowly. And then it reshaped, and I was in a completely mythological place with like I was saying, dwarves and these floating crystal cities. And I was like, oh my gosh, where did So that's really cool about the transfer point too, because I was actually another way I got to, Veil. I was told to get to Veil Sanctum they put a symbol on the bus, like on the wall, and they said, okay, you just have to jump through this symbol, and then you'll be at where you want to go. And I'm like, okay. So, I attempted to get there. Unfortunately, I woke up when I was making the transition, but that's really interesting that, they told that there's a transfer place. I never heard of that.
Yeah. Robert Monroe, he refers to like the part area where you incarnate as like a subway kind of thing, right? Except it was very abstract. Do you remember that, Mike?
I do remember that. And then he also refers to like the place where everybody goes to after they die as the park, right? And it's like this, I can't tell by his writing if it's actually a physical park or if that's just a metaphor for something else. But yeah, he has he does compare things to things that you would see in the physical world, like you said, like a subway station or like a park.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about Robert Monroe's writing is that I can still kind of see things in the abstract sense. I don't know if people who don't astral project can do it, but as an astral projector, I can actually see not just the physical aspect of it, but the abstract aspects of what he's experiencing, because he's so good at giving us that picture that's not necessarily like fully physical and materialistic. Do you find that he really has the astral essence in his writing, even if it's somewhat hard to understand and comprehend at times?
I do. Yeah, I think Bob Monroe is one of my favorite writers for that reason. He puts far more description into what he experiences in the astral, or what he sees in the astral, than anybody else I've read. You know, everybody else, they talk about getting there, and that's great, you know, because a lot of people have trouble getting there, but he has by far the best descriptions of what it's like once you're there. All right, Josh Walker. There seems to be over a dozen of astral projection meditation guides now. Is there one way that can work easily for you depending on your full concentration? I had the same problem. That was one of my major complaints when I first started this path. Is about 3.5 years ago, I started looking into projection, and there were thousands of videos, and there's I read over 60 books on the topic, and there's so many different techniques and people's opinions, and people who just provide a very high level bit of information, but really not enough to give you what you need to learn it. And it was incredibly frustrating. That's actually one of the reasons I started this channel, is because I wanted to try to fill in all of the blanks that I found other people had left. But I would say that the people who were most helpful for me were, well, from an inspiration standpoint, Bob Monroe, just because, you know, like we talked about, he gave me a clear idea of maybe what I could expect. But from a technique perspective, I would say Michael Raduga and Frank Keppel were the two that helped me out of multiple roadblocks where I would hit some point and I wouldn't know what to do next. And one of those two, Frank Keppel or Raduga, they would actually talk about that exact same scenario where I was getting stuck. And I would say, oh, that's what I need to do to get out of this. Unfortunately, it took me, I didn't even find those folks until I was, well, one of them I was a year into it, and the other one I was like 2 years into it before I discovered their writings. So those are my own two personal favorites as far as like practical guidebooks. B. Jones, don't the deceased live on the astral plane, and if so, can you interact with them? Yeah, so I have run into people who claim that they're dead. I ran into my own grandpa, who passed away a decade and a half ago. They tend to be surprised to see you, at least in my experience. A couple of them that I've run into just seem like they're playing out their physical life, but in the astral, because they don't know what else to do. And what's interesting is this matches up pretty closely with what William Buhlman talks about and what Bob Monroe talks about, how people get into these patterns and these belief systems, and what Buhlman calls these consensus realities, where they die and they just continue on living like they did when they were in physical life. They go to the same churches and they continue trying to go to work, and they have the same desires and same needs and same addictions. Monroe talks quite a bit about this type of addiction that people have, and how it doesn't go away after you die, and how you try to still fulfill that same or feed that same addiction once you're in the astral plane. So it seems to be the consensus that you can interact with deceased. That's a really difficult thing to prove. My grandpa, I ran into him. I know that he's passed, and so but I don't have any proof that he didn't tell me anything, incredible that I could then go and verify and say there's no way I could have known this in the physical life. And the other people, I didn't gather enough information to be able to go back and find them once I came back. So it's possible. I don't have any definitive proof on that one.
I'd say that you most definitely can. I mean, my best validation revolves around one person that died. Do you remember that, Mike, with the soldier?
Oh, yes, I do.
Yeah, so I'd say that's proof to me, but I mean, maybe not to everybody. It's just like my word. So, I mean, take it with a grain of salt. I'd say that you can meet dead people in the astrals. you can interact with most of them, but I find most of the time it's unintelligible. Like if you know they're deceased, that's probably how you know you're deceased. Is one of the factors that you take in is that your communication with them is unintelligible. They don't seem to be aware as to what they're doing or where they are. And just to put this out there, I don't recommend telling them where they are and forcing upon any sort of information about their circumstances. You just have to ask questions to make them think about their circumstances. And that retains free will with the interaction, and it usually ends up without, frightening anybody or confusing anybody.
Yeah, so the soldier instance that you're talking about, you ran into a soldier, if I remember right, you ran into a soldier that you were then able to go back and verify based on information that he gave you or that you saw around him, that you were able to verify, where he was from, or what location he was in, or the battalion he was in, or things like that. Is that right?
There wasn't too many verbal details, because again, the interaction is very crude. But I was able to observe that, the urban camo of the guy assaulting him, and they just got jumped out of nowhere. They didn't see it coming. The environment was on a road. I was in Afghanistan. I somehow just knew that. And the exact time I had the experience is the exact time that this guy died. And there's some other things in there. But it was definitely my best bit of validation. And basically, I have that on my blog somewhere. We can put a link to it, I suppose. I can't actually link in the live chat because it rejects the links, but... Oh, does it? Okay. Yeah, if you want, you can put it in the description. Okay. Yeah, I'll do that, and I'll put a link to your book and to your blog. Phil Schmidt, just to let you guys know, I'm going to wrap this up here in the next 15 or so minutes. I know I said I was going to go for an hour. We had some technical difficulties at the beginning, and questions are still coming in, but I've got a couple of other things I need to do today, so I'll go for another 10, 15 minutes, and I'm going to wrap it up. Phil Schmidt says, what are some things that you currently want to accomplish when you AP? So there's the primary goal that I have right now is actually to pull my kids out of body and have a shared experience, because I think that would be incredible. And that's partially for the validation piece of it, but partially because I just can't imagine how great it would be to have something like that you could share with your kids if they were able to remember that as well. I've pretty much stopped on the trying to seek validation or verification type stuff. I had dedicated every single experience to trying to verify that this was really happening for the longest time, and I just wasn't able to do it. Definitively, I was able to come across some scenarios where there was some coincidence, but nothing ever definitive. So I got to the point where it was getting old, and so I'd like to do that. I'd like to pull my kids out of body and share an experience with them. I've been talking to other people about these various planes that people talk about. So people talk about these various planes of existence, and I spend 99.9% all of my time in what Robert Bruce calls the real time zone. It's like a simulation of the real world. And I have to be honest, it's getting a little bit boring because I'm in the physical world all day long, and I love flying, and that keeps it interesting for me, and walking through walls and things like that. But I would love to see some of these other magical planes of existence or consciousness, that people talk about, things that I haven't been able to reach yet. So that's my other goal, is to try to find some way to achieve these other states. Because at some point, Frank Keppel actually talks about how he got bored with the real time zone as well, and I don't want this practice to get boring for me. So I need to continue to try to, continue to push forward and learn new things, and that's I think where the point where I'm at. All right, for me, I just want to find somebody, like an entity that is a good source of information and is positive all the time. Because I hear about these people that have these spirit guides. They know them very well. They have names for their spirit guides, and they communicate with them on a weekly basis or something like that. And through all of my travels, it's been different entities all the time. I don't have any sort of solid spirit guide. And I always wanted to find these guides, whether, I mean, they're specific to me or not, doesn't matter. I just want to have this one being that I can say, yes, this is my friend, my astral bud, and be like, just ask them anything that I want and summon them or whatever and travel to them. That'd be pretty neat, I find. That's something that I haven't had consistently throughout all of my astral experience that a lot of people have. And it seems like a fun time. It seems pretty nice to have an astral friend.
That would be great. Yeah, like I mentioned, I run into different people every time. I don't have a consistent guide either. That would be... Robert Monroe got so attached to his that he was severely depressed when his consistent guide left him. And it would be really cool to have an astral friend that you feel that close to. Matt Justice says the void is awesome. I concur.
Yeah. For us, at least, some people find it frightening.
Some people do. I find it very comforting and relaxing. I really like it. Have you ever been able to switch to your casual body?
I think he means causal. Where's that?
Oh, am I reading? It says causal. I'm sorry. I guess it could help if I were literate, right? What is the causal body? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that. Anybody on the live chat know?
It probably corresponds to, it probably has different names, and we're just not familiar with that particular name. But I'm not familiar with it either.
I know there's different energetic bodies you can switch to, because I've had experiences where I've been astral projecting and then I have astral projected in an astral projection. So it's like I switch. How it feels like is, you know, you go into a meditative state and you project into what I got was that it was my shadow body. And then so my astral body was the reflection, because everyone in that state could see me, but I had switched dimensions and was astral projecting using using another energetic body and, you know, interacting with other dimensions. So I do believe you can. So I do believe you can switch dimensions and have multiple energetic bodies that you're switching into. And some people have even bilocated while astral projecting, been in two places at once, observing themselves. So that may be what he's talking about, but I'm not too sure.
All right, thanks. Thanks for that. Adrian says, Robert Bruce talks about methods to recall the AP experiences and the fact that it's quite easy to forget them. Do you find remembering being an issue sometimes? So I guess that depends. For my conscious projections where it's, you know, I'm inducing the experience and I get out of body, I would say no. It's so profound and incredible that it's not a difficult thing to remember at all. In fact, I remember it far more clearly than I would ever remember anything like a dream. But then you've got people like Buellman who say that people project every single night and they're just floating out of phase with their body, and it's like it's an unintentional projection. And in those instances, I absolutely don't remember any of that, because I don't remember ever projecting unintentionally, I suppose. So maybe there's scenarios like that where I don't remember and there'd be something that I need to do to remember it. Robert Bruce talks about with your first experiences, keep them very short and then immediately jump back into your body shouting your success and try to use that type of technique to remember your experience. But I haven't ever had any scenarios where I have a difficult time remembering that I just projected. It's just such a profound thing. It's difficult to forget.
All right, I got something to add to that. So what you want to do is you want to document everything, even if it's insignificant. Because if I have a bunch of insignificant dreams and just not document it, over the course of a week, I'll have an astral projection, like forget all of it, just because I suppose I've trained my brain to think of these altered states as insignificant in general. So just document everything, and it will help you. I guess it will put importance on your altered states, and you'll be able to remember them better. Also, run through the altered state after you experience it in your head, like try to find the beginning and then iterate through it. Also, publishing, if you can, should post your experiences somewhere, because sharing your experiences will, I guess it will just add a sort of essence to your experience. Like you want people to like help you reflect on it and all that if you can, and it makes it just more of a involved thing. It gives you more incentive to remember these things.
That's a great point. Yeah, definitely document everything. That's crucial. It's helped in my success significantly, whether that's dreaming, lucid dreaming, or projection. Document everything you can. You know, as far as documentation goes, the other thing that I found that helps is to document the things that you try, not just the experiences themselves, but document, you know, what you did to get to a specific state, how far you got, you know, what you did beforehand, you know, how tired were you, what did you eat, you know, did you eat before bed, did you not eat before bed, did you do any sort of progressive relaxation? Keep like a thorough journal of everything that you did, and that way when you have a success, you can look back at that and you can say, here's all the things that I did that led up to that success. Or you can say, here's a list of things that I know don't work because I've tried them 200 times and they're not doing anything for me. I got that idea from Robert Monroe. He documented everything all the way to like barometric pressure and phases of the moon and which direction his head was facing. And it was significant because you look back and you say, well, I haven't had a success in 5 months. Well, how often are you going to remember 5 months ago to say, here's the things I did that led to that success? And so when your successes are far and few between, it's great to have that record and say, I've got these things that I know work. And then you can push the process a little bit further until you find the next step that helps you, you know, progress.
Another thing is, I don't know if the particular person has control over this, but if you let your dreams go on too far, like if you astral project and you come to a dream or just a more insignificant part of your experience that doesn't really seem to have much to it, you might want to consider cutting your experience short so you can document the important part. I do it every once in a while. I find it helps. Like I know when I'm in some sort of scrambled sleep paralysis experience or messed up dream that's just kind of like this two-dimensional imagery that doesn't make any sense, and I'll remember having an important experience before and I'll wake myself up like instantly. Just I don't know how I do it exactly, but I just know how to wake myself out of dreams, and that helps me. Like if you let your dreams run on for too long after an astral projection, it's almost impossible to remember the astral projection.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, Emma says, when you project in the real time zone, do you experience projections with a lot of etheric energy, which prevents you to go too far from your body? Any tips on getting rid of this energy? I don't. I can't say I've experienced that. I have found that now this might just be. So I mentioned before that belief is important in this type of practice. And I've read a lot that, you know, the closer you are to your body, to your physical body, the shorter your experience will be because you have sort of that magnetic pull to your body. And I've experienced that many, many times. And I don't know if it's because I expect it to happen and so it does, or if that's really just truly what happens for everybody. But what I've found is that if I can hurry and scramble away from my body as fast as possible, that my experiences tend to be longer. But once I get a good 10, 15 feet away, I don't tend to have any issue going further. I don't ever feel like there's any sort of energy that's pulling me back. There are a lot of times where experiences just end prematurely or before you want them to end, and you don't have control over how long you stay out. In fact, they tend to land. The experiences tend to last much shorter periods of time than you prefer. But I don't feel like there's any energy pulling me back and keeping me within proximity to my body. So hopefully that answers your question.
That could be actually a type of body, not like a body that people typically don't use to get out of body with. Mm-hmm. I recall, I don't know if you remember this, but I have an experience where I could see my silver cord as like this fiery red cord. And I was only like 1 kilometer away from my physical body, and I couldn't go any further than that. And my body was fiery red, and there's all these like interpenetrating energies that were just kind of passing through each other, and the cycle of energy, like in my body, was unusual. The fact that I was looking at it and it was very tangible was unusual. without it being my actual physical form or a replica of it. And that like never happens. I never see my body like this, and I never have that or I almost never have that limitation where I can't go that far. So I assumed that I was just using another body that's bound very closely or tightly to my physical body that isn't the astral body necessarily. That is another theory that you can delve into, and your thoughts on this question that you have.
Right, thank you. Let's see. Did Monroe at some point throw out everything and move to the phasing model? I don't know that he ever threw out everything, but in his third book, in his final book, he actually does mention in his book that after all these decades of practice and all these decades of just lying down and reaching the vibrational state through relaxation, he found, and I think his words were that it was absurdly easy to just roll out during the wake-up process. So you've got somebody with decades of experience that can just project almost any time he wants from the sounds of it, just by laying down, relaxing, and going through the mind awake, body asleep process. And somebody like that with this type of experience calls it absurdly easy to roll out during the wake up process. So that was something that I guess sort of got my attention, because I thought maybe that's the direction I need to go, and that's what got me focused on this indirect method in the first place. Is if somebody with that much experience can find this method so much easier, I thought there's got to be something to it. So I really started focusing on the indirect method, and that's kind of what got me to where I am. But the majority of my successes come from that, after waking up rather than putting my body to sleep. So I'm not sure he ever threw it away completely, but that's a great point that he did move to that, or at least recognized the value in it at some point. All right, let me see if I have any more questions. It looks like they pretty much stopped in the comment thread. False awakenings. Are false awakenings the same as an OBE? They're not the same as an OBE. A false awakening is basically you're in a dream, whether lucid or not, and then you feel like you've woken up, or you dream that you woke up, but you didn't really wake up. And you can get stuck in these false awakening loops. I've been in these false awakening loops where I've woken up 6 or 7 times. And at the end, it's just incredibly confusing as to whether or not you're really awake or not. But it's waking up in a dream into another dream. And then, you feel like you've woken up, and I've gone to write in my dream journal, and then I realize I'm still in a dream. So different than an OBE, but still an interesting phenomenon. All right, I think I covered everything that was sent in. So it seems like it might be a good time to cut this off. We're almost at 2 hours. I apologize again for the technical difficulties at the beginning. I'll know a little bit more next time I do one of these. I really appreciate you guys all joining. Thanks for joining the Hangouts. Thanks for leaving your comments. I enjoyed the conversation. Hopefully it was beneficial to you guys as well.
Thanks, FaZe, and everyone. That was awesome.
All right, guys. I'll talk to you later.
Later.